Welcome to another edition of I Didn't Know That. Happens here on Facebook every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. with our host, Mike Stoffer, me, Karaoke Bob. This is, of course, presented by Stoffer Mortgage. Tonight, our Election 2020 wrap-up with Dr. Jarrod Tudor, who joined us last week. In case you missed it, was the best election coverage in the nation was right here on I Didn't Know That. So make sure that you are here every week because it's always the best. And we'll also have Jared Gray with some Veterans Day remembrance, his recollections. And what am I doing? I'm just rambling now for some reason because that's it. Now there's Mike Stoffer. I couldn't find the right button. Now my thoughts are just all over the place.
Just kind of like your notes were while we were backstage before the show when you had your guitar out and you were just basically non-responsive when I was trying to talk to you. And you were just playing away on your guitar.
Well, there was a button that I didn't realize was on here, which was just a jam track. So I was like, oh.
Actually, Jared's going to be talking. Jarrod Gray is going to be talking about the original Armistice. How I won't talk about it because we're going to let Jarrod talk about it. But
okay,
he's got some really interesting facts
and some cool artifacts.
Yeah,
as well.
Artifacts as well.
We'll get to
and you are absolutely right. What you said earlier that we had the best election night coverage. I mean, Jarrod Tudor was just phenomenal.
Fantastic.
And I got to give him an A plus on it because I think he pretty much nailed this.
And really what I thought was pretty astounding is the stuff that he talked about, what to look for was very close, if not right on, to what actually played out over the next 24, 36, 72, up to a week later. Right. And, so when, people around the country are going, how could this have happened? How could this have happened? I'm thinking, well, if you study elections and you study this for a living, it's not any kind of crazy hocus pocus. This is just, with a lifetime of observations, you can make these types of predictions, as other people did as well. So fascinating stuff. Can't wait to kind of dig into what we saw happen after last week. So
right, he's got a lot of great follow-up information, some exit poll information you're going to find fascinating. And of course, as we all know, tomorrow is Veterans Day. So we want to thank all veterans for their service and wish them a great day tomorrow. And speaking of veterans, one of our, what do we call them? Listeners, viewers, yes. Listeners, yes. Audience members, yes. One of our regular audience members, Steve Ingalls. It's his birthday today, and he is a veteran.
Happy birthday, Steve. Thank you for your service.
And I don't see him clocked in on here, and I imagine he's out to dinner and smoking a cigar and having a brandy or something that he always, or cognac or something fancy that he has. But happy birthday, Steve.
Joshua says, in regards to your grade for Jarrod Tudor, give him a B for no reason other than that's what he gave him in business law and finance.
So Jarrod is going to have to do some explaining about the B he gave Mr. Ondo.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there needs to be, some reckoning on that, some explaining. In addition to it being Steve Ingalls' birthday, and today is a very special day as well because it is the birthday of the Marine Corps.
Oh, man, I would have played a different song at the beginning.
Well, so the Marine Corps was founded on this day when the Continental Congress ordered that 2 battalions of Marines be raised for service during the American Revolution. So we have a lot of good military remembrances to have today. Yeah, well, you know how that goes. Your screens go out on you when you're not paying attention. And so we have Jarrod that's going to do our post-election follow-up. Jarrod Gray, as you had mentioned, is going to do some information on Armistice Day. I also forgot to mention last week that the show is going to be migrating away from the Stoffer Mortgage business page on Facebook and going to the I Didn't Know That Show page.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Yes. Are you able to
I can cross post.
You can cross post. So
I can put this on both pages.
are you doing that now?
No.
Okay. So starting next week. Well, actually, you're going to be away all of December, and you're going to cause me to have to figure all this out.
So starting January 1st, the show will be on 2 places at once. So probably we'll keep it right here through the end of the year. And then beginning in January, we will migrate to a brand new I Didn't Know That page.
And one last thing before we bring Jarrod on, as we give everybody an opportunity to get signed on. The mugs are out. We have been asking people to send a selfie in. Bob, I'm waiting for a selfie of you. I told Deirdre that
Screenshot right now.
What's that? Well, yeah, I'll go back and get that. Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome.
So send those in, and we're having some fun with everybody as they send in a picture of themselves with their mug. So thank you to everybody for willing to do that and participate, and for everybody that's been on the show. We are slowly getting mugs out. Bob, very good. Okay, yeah. Everybody, let's pause for a moment while Bob, multitasks. Yes.
There we go.
So without further ado, why don't we bring on Dr. Jarrod Tudor?
Hey, guys.
Hey, Jarrod, how are you?
Living the dream. How are you guys doing?
Excellent. I enjoy calling you Dr. Jarrod Tudor because I've known you for, 15 years or so. Yeah. And you have more letters after your name than there are available in the English alphabet. I mean, did I ask you last week what all are your degrees in? Do we have enough time for you to tell us everything that you have your degrees in?
Only if you want to make time.
Just rattle them off in alphabetical order very quickly.
So I got a bachelor's degree in political science. I got a master's degree in political science. I have a first law degree. I have 2 second law degrees. I have an MBA, an MPA, an EDS, and a PhD.
When do you graduate?
From which one?
I was going to say, aren't you I'm looking, I'm just kind of adding up all the years, and it just doesn't. I was like, wow, that's you're still in school then.
The amazing thing about Jarrod is he's got all that education behind him, and he's a complete mess. You know what I mean? So I'm just kidding. I know. Hey, keep this.
Yeah, none of us
are on you.
After I know it's we're all a mess.
Absolutely. Well, so Jarrod, you've got some big shoes to fill because the guy we had on last week was absolutely phenomenal. And so you're going to have to fill them and expand them. So let's talk about the election. First of all, as far as Bob and I can tell, you nailed it.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah, I think I had a pretty good night on Tuesday night. And again, things are still coming in, but yeah, I thought Joe Biden would win. I thought it would be close, and for the most part, that's pretty easy. I thought Joe Biden would win. In fact, the only prediction that I felt confident making was that he would win the popular vote, and he did. And just by looking at the numbers going into tonight's show, it's roughly about 4.5 million ahead of Donald Trump. But again, we saw a record number of voters. That's a good thing. All right, that's a wonderful thing. We're going to come very close to 150 million Americans that voted. So, and again, if you think Joe Biden had more Americans vote for him than any other candidate, and second place is Donald Trump, who had the second most Americans ever vote for a presidential candidate, and he did it last Tuesday night.
Yeah, that's really remarkable. I think it's great. I think it just shows how engaged, for whatever reason, the American people were in this election, and
they continue to be engaged, Bob. Some of them rather angrily engaged.
Yeah, I hope that kind of. My true hope for coming out of this, I really, you just, like I said last week, is you really saw a lot of families tore apart by the past 4 years, and that maybe having a little less rhetoric it might do us all a little good.
So, Jarrod, if you could give us a broad thing, a recap of what you were talking about with the election, because from last Tuesday, you were talking about You thought that Joe Biden was going to win some states that Donald Trump had won against Hillary Clinton. Just kind of give us a little recap of what you said, just a brief, short recap, and then let's talk about what actually happened. And then let's take it from there, if we could.
Sure. Again, we were focusing on 10 states and at the word go last Tuesday night. And of that 10, we really kind of focused on half that number, say 5, right? And this, to me, meant Arizona out in the West, and then what many political experts were calling the blue wall, which I personally don't think really exists, but that's Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And as it stands right now, and I think this is going to, regardless of the slowness of the counts in Pennsylvania and Arizona, I think it's going to stick to those 4 states that Joe Biden's going to flip. I also think he's going to flip Georgia, which, if you remember on Tuesday, we weren't quite sure that was going to happen. We were looking at Georgia and Texas as 2 states that eventually will go blue. I think demographically that's going to happen. But I wasn't quite sure. We weren't quite sure whether that would happen or not on Tuesday. In Texas, not so much. Texas was won by the president by 5.7 percentage points. That's down from his win of 9.2% in 2016. So he did lose a little bit of support there. But Georgia, right now, the vice president, Joe Biden, has a 0.3% lead in Georgia. It's about 14,000 votes. And that's from 2016's victory by the president of 5.7%. So again, once I started to see Arizona really become a flip state, I got a little bit more confident about that. Those 3 states in the Midwest. Now, again, we were also looking at our own Buckeye state here in Ohio, and frankly, the Trump campaign had a really good night in Ohio. They really got their ground game out. So hats off to the Ohio Republican Party for getting their ground game going. The president basically kept his support in Ohio at a time when, a lot of those polls had Joe Biden, frankly, winning, and some of them by 3, 4, 5 percentage points. Now, again, that's a whole different discussion when it comes to the polls. But the ground game was very, very strong for President Trump, winning Stark County. Stark County being our bellwether county as we had talked about, Ohio being a bellwether state. But again, Trump winning both. Trump also won Mahoning County, something that hadn't been done for quite some time by a Republican, showing a real shift. And frankly, what we would consider industrial blue collar counties. Again, Joe Biden still winning in Summit, Cuyahoga, Lucas, Franklin, Montgomery, and Hamilton. But again, that's it. Throw in Athens County, and that's all he did. He won 6 counties. Joe Biden won 6 counties in Ohio. So a really good night in Ohio, at least for the president that way.
Go ahead, Bob.
And, we were talking about some of these states that are going to go to recount. And I had a question about, is it a federal mandate or is it by the state? Because I've heard if it's 1% or less, you can either request a recount, or it's just kind of is it an automatic thing, and is that 1% across the board, no matter what state you're in?
That's a great question. And the answer is it depends on what state you're in. So we have 50 states. We have 50 different sets of election law, right? So in some states, if it's less than a 1% difference between the top 2 candidates, it's an automatic recount, almost always a machine recount. In some states, it's 0.5%. In some states, there is no automatic recount. You have to ask for one. Now, that's at the state level. And then Bobby asked a good question. Well, what about the feds? Well, the federal government really doesn't get involved in that kind of issue, except if one party petitions to a federal court and a federal court believes there's an equal protection argument to be made or a due process argument to be made in regard to how the ballots are counted. So you start with really state statutory law. And then, of course, as we all had our textbook case 20 years ago, Bush versus Gore, the federal courts can get involved. And again, in that particular case, the case started through the Florida state courts and then wound up in the United States Supreme Court because of its jurisdiction on federal questions such as equal protection and due process. And so you start with a state statute. Again, automatic recounts. generally 1%, 0.5%, almost all machine recount, by the way. Very rarely are they behind. We're looking at these, hanging chads or the butterfly ballots or things of that nature.
And in Florida, do you recall what the separation was between Al Gore and George W. Bush at that point?
537 votes.
Yeah, so it was really, really close. Yeah. And in most of these instances, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, that are all really close, we're talking about 10,000 votes or more in all of those cases. So the likelihood that the decision is going to change, save for some crazy, wacky, historic voter fraud in any of those states, which it would have to be a historic type thing for that to change.
It would. I can't imagine any of the results changing. Now, I think recounts are a good idea. I think, if you're going to be sure, let's really be sure. And when they're machine recounts, it takes time and it costs some money. It's not cheap, but I think it's worthwhile. And that's why we have state laws that say, hey, you know what? We don't care what either of the first two contestants want. We're gonna have an automatic machine recount.
So how many states do you think off the top of your head are going to go to recount?
If I had to guess, you might have 5. Now, again, and if you're asking me how many do I think, you'll probably 2 be Pennsylvania and Georgia. I don't think it'll be all 5. Michigan, from what I understand, is outside of their stat, and I don't off the top of my head know what their statutory recount figure is. But looking at, I know the Trump campaign did file a lawsuit in Michigan to get a recount. Michigan is separated by 2.6 percentage points, roughly 150,000 votes. Much like Bob said, I don't see any way in which it would change. Yeah. But again, if you're the outgoing president, such as Donald Trump, given the way he looks at the world, and it's probably something you're going to have your legal team do.
So, Bob, do you have any more questions regarding the presidential election? Because I've got some. No,
I mean, I think
some other things.
Well, one thing that can I give my crackpot theory before we move on?
That's
of course.
That's what you major in, Bob. Crackpot theories.
I major in crackpot theory. I'm an expert. Anybody that wasn't here, obviously, before the show started, just the 4 of us. My expertise happened for about 5 minutes of an out-of-body experience playing guitar prior to. So we'll just put that out there.
Which is good plan.
Some great playing, by the way.
It was great playing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, we've heard a lot about, especially as it comes to the way people are framing a potential voter fraud thing. Is it like, well, it's just crazy that, Donald Trump loses, but they hold the Senate and they gain in the House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. And my theory was the Lincoln Project effect. So where you have Republicans, the never Trump Republicans, who typically, I would guess from like Mitt Romney's behavior in the past, is that if a high-ranking Republican or a Republican doesn't like their candidate, they will write somebody in or do something goofy. They won't vote for the other candidate, the other party's candidate. Where in this case, I think you saw Republicans cross over and do that because they felt a change needed to be made in the presidency. But then again said, we're going to give you the presidency, but we're going to keep the Senate. That was kind of my thought of how that explains that, is that we're going to make some moves in Congress, but we need to reshape the presidency moving forward.
Yeah, the one thing I would say, what you've seen even in the last week, 7 days, week since we've met, is you're starting to see some positioning for 2024 already. So you can start to see some of these camps in the Republican Party kind of split out. I mean, you look at a Mitt Romney. What's to keep him from running for president again in 4 years? He has literally nothing to lose except maybe some time. And of course, maybe he's looking for the group that's willing to break from Trump. You look at Mike Pompeo over the last week, who's been a staunch Trump supporter, saying, "Hey, you know what? We're getting ready." I think he said today, we're getting ready for a transition to the second Trump term, and he's looking to maybe keep that group under his wing. Now, I will say this: getting back to the Senate, I think Donald Trump, as we had mentioned last week. In fact, Bob, I think you'd made the point that all you had heard from was Trump. You really didn't hear from Biden much. You know, to the president's credit, he may have done enough barnstorming with his rallies to allow the Republicans to keep the Senate. It definitely didn't hurt North Carolina. It definitely didn't hurt in Iowa. It didn't hurt in Maine, although, you know, again, Senator Collins and the president don't necessarily see eye to eye. I will say this, and it reminds me a lot of what we saw in 1996, where Bob Dole knew he was going to lose to President Clinton, but frankly did enough to keep the Senate within the Republicans, Republican control. Now, with that said, I think you're starting to see some factions. I do, and I'm certainly hopeful all at the same time that this will this tension between the president and the president-elect will go away a little bit, because if you look at it right now as it stands at 8:21 on Tuesday night, November 10th, the best candidate the Republicans have for 2024 is Donald Trump.
And he would be 70. I guess it doesn't matter because
Joe Biden.
I was going to say, because Joe Biden is old, and you pretty much got into where I was going to lead to, was to ask you what happened in the House and the Senate in terms of, you know, how that mix went, and you basically answered that.
Yeah, with the House certainly wasn't going to change hands. Again, the Democrats had a huge lead, and frankly, that was going to be tough to keep, because they did so well in 2018. And again, they're going to lose maybe 5, 6, 7 seats and still keep control of the House. Again, as we had talked about last week, the Senate is certainly up for grabs. Again, you're going to have a vice president, Kamala Harris, who may be very, very busy monitoring the Senate if it winds up 50-50. We're going to, again, our election season is by no means over. Everybody's going to be focusing, if not the whole world. And I know that sounds a little ridiculous, but I think it's very true. The whole world's going to be focusing on Georgia. And as we had said last week, we could have come out of last Tuesday night with 2 Democratic senators. Now, again, we knew it wasn't likely to happen, but it was possible. What we are going to have is a runoff in both of those cases. It would be interesting to see what happens and how millions of dollars are going to be spent in the state of Georgia in these next two months. And of course, campaign finance being a whole different story. But there's so much on the line. If the president-elect, if Joe Biden wants to get anything done, he's got to have control of the Senate. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get everything through because of the filibuster rule in the Senate. But if not, you've got gridlock for at least another 2 years before, again, we get another set of House elections, and of course, another third of the Senate would go up as well.
So, give us a time frame for when all this will get settled, this election on all facets.
Well, hopefully, January 5th, we'll have a clear idea as to what happened in Georgia in those Senate races.
Okay,
let's hope. All right. So that's one piece. I think when it comes to what President Trump decides to do, if he decides to concede, I say this with all sincerity, I hope this kind of goes away, the tension goes away, and the president's team will allow the vice president to move in. And if President Trump were to look at the numbers and look at where things are right now, I think he stands to gain by doing this. And if nothing, say, okay, fine, this is over. Come on in, and I'll see you in 4 years. Because again, if you look at the raw numbers, and we can get into them when you're ready, Donald Trump is the best candidate the Republicans have for 2024, given the numbers we have right now.
Okay.
And, looking ahead at 2024, and you both brought up age. So Donald Trump will be 77 in 24. That'll make Joe Biden 81. Do you think that Joe Biden in 4 years opts not to defend his presidency and pass the baton to Kamala Harris?
I do. Again, if I had to guess, but the real answer I would give is I really don't know. But if I had to guess yes or no, I would guess that he is probably going to step aside and open the door to Kamala Harris to become the first woman president of the United States. Now, whether that's a smart move for the Democratic Party or not, you got to look at the numbers. The goal is to win, right? You got to look at numbers. She's a great campaigner. She, I think, certainly has the energy to do it. I think she'll probably have a lot to do over the next 4 years, so she'll be out and about. And she looks like she might be running the Senate. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But with that said, I think, a lot can happen in 4 years. I get it. But I think you've only got a handful of Republicans that are well suited to win in 2024. And for the Democrats, it's either Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. I truly would believe that the Democrats would clear things out. If Joe Biden wants to step aside, clear things out for Kamala Harris. I think there's too much downside risk. If they didn't do that, if they had a contested primary, I don't think it would go well. Because the one thing to keep in mind, especially when you look at the numbers, I don't know if the Democrats can have such a huge turnout in 4 years again. I'm certainly, they hope they would. And of course, all of us that love the process would want as many people to show up as possible and vote. But that's going to be really, really difficult it's going to be difficult to match this kind of voter turnout again.
So we just have a couple more minutes left here, Jarrod. Give us some of your data on the exit polls, because you had some really interesting things to talk about regarding the exit polls.
I think we can break down the race and its closest. Now, again, you see a spread in the popular vote of roughly 4.5 million votes. Remember, in an electoral college system, even though we're the only ones who've got one around the world, you kind of have to put that aside. That's not where the race is won, right? So just looking at a couple of numbers, right? Biden wins with women, 57%. 18 to 29 years old, 9-year-olds, 60%. 30 to 44-year-olds, 52%. First-time voters, 64%. There's your voter turnout. That's what the Democrats are going to have to match in 4 years to hold on to the presidency. Moderates, 64%. Independents, 54%. Those that live in cities, 60%. Those that live in suburbs, they won 50%. All right. Trump actually had 48%, 2% going to others. Right. Now, another key statistic, if you remember, we were talking last week about the impact of the Green Party in those 3 Great Lakes states. Those who did not vote Republican or Democrat, but also voted in 2016, which means they voted for Gary Johnson, they voted for Jill Stein, 60% of them showed up for Joe Biden. So think about what the Democrats did. They did a little bit better with women, right? They did a little bit better with younger people, first-time voting, getting those to not vote for third-party people. They got the moderates, they got the independents. Now, with that said, it's not to say that Donald Trump did not have a good night, all right? He actually did better with white women this year than he did 4 years ago. All right. Now think about that. That's a pretty compelling number. He had 52% of that vote. He had 55% of that vote this time around. All right. Now, with that said, all right, if I were to take a look at the states that flipped, all right, this race was won by 200 is the way it stands right now at, again, 8:29 on Tuesday, November 10th. This race was really won by 243,000 votes. And to put it into perspective, think about Bush versus Gore 20 years ago that we were talking about, when Al Gore won the popular vote by 500,000 votes. This is half of that, right? Think about it. A 14,000 vote win in Arizona, 150,000 votes in Michigan, 20,000 votes in Wisconsin, 45,000 in Pennsylvania as it stands right now. I don't think that number will get much bigger. And 14,000 in Georgia. Add those up, 243,000 votes. You can change 243,000 minds. If you're the president, you have a second term. So going in, if you think about it, he only lost the election by 243,000 votes. Doesn't matter what the popular vote says, right? He did that 4 years ago. So if you think about these very small swings percentage-wise, 4.5% in Arizona, 2.9% in Michigan, 1.3% in Wisconsin, 1.4% in Pennsylvania, 6% in Georgia. He did better in Florida. That means the ground game got out there in Ohio, as we had mentioned earlier, and Florida. He actually did better in Florida, kept Ohio just about the same place that he did. Again, if you look at the raw numbers, you can change the minds of 243,000 people, or the Democrats can't get their ground game out like they did. This is going to be tough to match. All right. Donald Trump, on paper right now, is the best Republican candidate in 2024.
And I had read a lot in the past couple of days about how the Biden campaign really eschewed getting the ground game going due to the pandemic, that they decided that they were if they were going to campaign on science and safety, that they felt that they really needed to pull back on that. And hopefully that, they'll be able to be on a little more solid footing. And, first I want to talk a little bit about first time voters, and then we'll let you go. But do you think with how, I think it felt to me like in this election that younger voters were way more engaged than we had seen in previous elections. Do you think that experience for them being young and being involved bodes well for the future of them continuing to turn out in the polls in elections coming?
Yeah, I think so. One thing that we do know through basic social science research is that voting is contagious, and it's kind of like getting a condition. It's kind of like getting inoculated for measles. You've got that with you the rest of your life. Maybe that's a terrible example in this day and age, but nonetheless, it is contagious. People, once they do it, they will keep doing it. Now, again, if Republicans have a challenge, this is what they've got. Is these young people get in and they start voting Democratic and they feel a win, right? They got in once. Again, with Joe Biden, maybe they're going to feel like they need to continue. And getting back to what we saw here, high voter turnout across the board, high voter turnout for Democrats, winning first-time votes, the moderates, the independents, and those that had voted in 2016, but for a third party. That's going to be tough to match, but that's going to have to be part of the Democratic strategy in 2024. Or again, you change 243,000 minds and you're going to lose.
Jarrod, you broke that down like a football game. I'm seriously. I mean, I find that really fascinating. All the different components and the parts and the strategy, behind all that. I thought that was just brilliantly broken down.
Thank you.
Fascinating. Jarrod, thanks for your time. Great information. Best election coverage out there. Period. CNN needs to call you, but we're not going to let you go. So you're property of the I Didn't Know That show from here on moving forward.
We'll just start sticking the CNN logo on our screen.
What? No, we're gonna We're gonna keep the I Didn't Know That logo on the screen.
Well, yeah, I mean, in addition to.
No, not happening. We don't need CNN. We have Jarrod Tudor. We don't need CNN.
That's right. You're right.
Right.
Well, thanks, guys, and thanks for the compliments. And the one thing I would want to say to all the veterans, thank you so much for your service. We wouldn't get to talk politics, especially in the way we get to do it without you. So thanks to the men and women of the armed services. We love you, and thank you so much.
Jarrod, thanks a lot.
That's my grandfather, 95 years old, and that guy's more active than I am. And he served in the Navy during World War II and watched the signing of the Armistice. He was on a neighboring vessel, and he said he watched it on binoculars. And it's fascinating to talk to. And there is something that I want to do with my grandfather. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Veterans History Project. It is a program of the Library of Congress, and any veteran at all can record their stories with the Library of Congress, and it goes into a searchable database. And you can do that right now. You can go to veteranshistoryproject.org and hear the stories of all these veterans from every conflict that has been recorded. It's really fascinating really gives you insight into, because I think, when you go into history books and you, just like everything else, you read numbers. You read there, this many were in battle, this many died, there are this many people in the Navy. Each one of those numbers was one person, and they had mothers, fathers, daughters, sisters, brothers. They had ambitions. They went to college. They liked climbing trees. And that's what the Veterans History Project is that it really tells the human story of something that I think maybe makes us more comfortable with war, to dehumanize it that way. But it really brings the human cost of conflict and what the true price that these veterans paid. So that way we could have elections, and we could have college football, and we could have NFL football, and we could finally have a winning Brown season. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, while you're bringing on Jarrod Gray to talk about Veterans Day and the Armistice, the original Armistice, I'm going to recognize a couple people that have logged on and mentioned and made some comments. Josh Ondo and Lori Evans. I want to mention Lori because we have added her as part of our show. We now have 6 people that are working on the show. Bob, did you know that?
That's great.
That me.
I didn't know that because I check out for a week and then I come back.
You check out for a week, and there's a lot that goes on while you're out. By the way. So so we have you and me. We have Deirdre, who handles all our graphics and keeps all our stats. As you know, we have Jarrod Gray, who's going to come on here and contribute. We have Mark Seibert, who was out on vacation and just returned, and so therefore is probably recovering. And Lori Evans, I asked her to join because she's got a lot of great ideas, going to make some really good contributions to the show, and she's got some things that she's going to be doing for us on the program, some projects. So, and Deirdre and Muggs, yes. And if you hadn't noticed, if you looked on Facebook today, I'm working on a mascot, Alex Bruno, who is one of our listeners' dogs, Andy Bruno. And Deirdre came up with the idea of making an I Didn't Know That dog bowl for Alex. So we just might just slap the old I Didn't Know That logo on anything, Bob. We might even put it on you, on your forehead.
Yeah. I'll get a tattoo right here.
I mean, as soon as you do that, we'll change the name of the show.
It's going to cost you.
Well, it was your idea. The show name was your idea.
I'd always thought that, I have a lot of great real estate here that I should sell it as a billboard.
You should.
I'm out in the public and visible. It's worth something. Right?
Absolutely. So why don't we bring on Jarrod and let him talk about Armistice?
Hey, Jarrod.
Hey, how you doing tonight?
Doing great. Thanks for your contribution while you're away. Wasn't able to format the video properly to get it onto the stream because I didn't realize that MOV files wouldn't work with this silly contraption. A little insider tech speak, but at any rate, it was great, and maybe we'll play it some other time. Even while you're on, just so we can show your in the field bit. It was very good.
Yeah,
very well done.
To it. We'll give it a go another time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I want to thank all the veterans from my family and ancestors, everyone who's currently serving and has served in the past. Thank you. That's kind of why we're here. We have all the nice freedoms that we have, our homes, our cars, our jobs. So thanks to all the veterans, and I really appreciate their service. So anyone tuning in, if you're a veteran or know a veteran, go out and thank them. So thank you. Mike, you actually stole a little bit of my thunder. I was actually going to talk about the birth date of the Marine Corps today, which happened in 1775, but you already touched on that. So I guess I'll go right into my little thing about Armistice Day.
Well, when we talked about it, you didn't mention anything. I wanted to make sure that I brought that up, the Marines.
Well, very good. Yeah, I'm glad you did.
So you have my apologies.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Now, you've got a great story, Jarrod. I mean, and by the way, for those of you, Jarrod, it's a real history buff and has a great way of winding these stories. So I just set the bar nice and high for you, Jarrod. So
sounds like you did.
Yeah. So let's talk about Armistice.
So tomorrow is Veterans Day, and I wanted to go over a little bit of history on Veterans Day and give you the background on it. So Veterans Day was actually originally called Armistice Day. And the first Armistice Day was celebrated at Buckingham Palace in England 1 year after the armistice on November 11th. And no, the armistice was a signing between the Allied and Central Powers ending World War I on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. So that's known as 11-11-11. And that's the armistice in 1918. And they started celebrating it at Buckingham Palace 1 year later. And the rest of the Allies followed suit. And England and France today still call it Armistice Day. A lot of the other Commonwealths like Canada and Australia and New Zealand have changed theirs to Remembrance Day over the years. And here in the United States, right after World War II in 1954, some veterans decided, World War II veterans decided, let's change this to Veterans Day to honor all living and past veterans. So that's why we celebrate Veterans Day today the way we do, is because World War II veterans kind of pushed this idea, and the original idea of Armistice Day has kind of gone by the wayside. And I think people don't really realize the original holiday, but that's kind of why we have it now. Is World War II veterans pushed for Veterans Day, and they got it, and good thing, because it's great to honor all the veterans who've given us what we have.
Right, because Armistice is pretty much just a World War I.
Yeah, strictly World War I. Really was just the signing between the Allies and the Central Powers on the Western Front, ending that. So it's strictly World War I, and it's only involved with that.
Right. So why don't they have armistices after World War I? Why are they peace treaties and other things? Do you know why they stopped calling them armistice?
That I am not sure.
Yeah, it just occurred to me. I'm just curious why that they're no longer called armistices. Maybe it's so hard to say armistices in the plural.
Yeah, that could be. But I think the armistice was actually planned several days in advance. All the leaders got together and talked, and they decided that this was when it was going to be. So it was kind of a slightly planned thing here. So possibly that could be it.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. The planned thing. Good.
Yeah.
So you had, am I jumping ahead by asking about family members? And
no, actually that was the next thing. I have a family member I'd like to share with you that did serve during World War I. And I believe Bob has a picture of him, and we could put it on the screen here in a second. Yeah, very good. So this is my great uncle Walter Clark, and he served during World War I, and he enlisted in 1916. And if you take a close look at his gaiters, the things there on just above his shoe, so take note of that, and then take note of his hat, because those are going to come up later here in my little spiel. So this is Walter. This is a pre-war. So this is before he gets sent over to France. If you go to the next slide here, one back. Yes. So this is actually his official roster. So there is a book out there. So there's a couple libraries in Ohio that have this. It's called The Official Roster of Ohio Soldiers, Sailors, and Marines. So this is his service record. And this will tell, it gives his serial number. It gives where he signed up, where he was born, his age, when he received his ranks, and exactly what he did. So that probably the most important thing there is the Meuse-Argonne defensive sector. So that's where he fought. That was the last major offensive during World War I. So from, I believe, late summer into the fall, that's where everything was at. So if you were a soldier during World War I and you were in the REF, the American Expeditionary Force, you were there. So Walter was there. If you go to the next picture, so this is Walter coming home. And this actually is a really cool picture. It features his divisional symbol there on his shoulder, which is the 37th Division. So it's a white O with a red O in the middle, which is for Ohio. It's known as the Buckeye Division. So he served in the Buckeye Division, and this is a post-war picture.
Wow.
So yeah, he went over pre-war, post-war.
And so how many battles was he in? Do you know?
Oh, he was really only in the Meuse-Argonne defensive sector.
Okay.
That it raged on for a couple months. So that was the only engagement he was in. I do have another relative, which unfortunately I don't have any equipment or pictures of. He's also from that same side of the family. He was in every major engagement in the RAF. I'm kind of actually trying to see if I can reach out to some distant family members to see if I can get a military picture of him, but I don't have one at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's some really interesting history on your side of the family, to be a part of all of that, and to make it through. Actually,
yeah,
that's impressive. So the pictures that you have, the other pictures with the artifacts, are you ready for those or
yeah, we can get to those. So those are all artifacts that I own. Yeah. I've been collecting World War I artifacts for 15 years or so.
Are any of these from your Uncle Walter?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
But once we get into some of this stuff, I do have a little twist there that's very important to me.
Okay.
So if you want to get to some of those, I will kind of explain a little bit about that.
All right.
So, all right. So
that's the hat we saw in the first picture. Am I right?
Yep. So this is actually known as a campaign hat. Unfortunately, that is not my Uncle Walter's. I did get this at a military show, but this is a typical campaign hat that all soldiers in the RAF would have worn. If you go to the next,
what's the jewelry around it?
That is actually the gentleman dog tags.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, so I actually was lucky enough that I ran into a collector at a gun show at the Mansfield Civil War show a couple years back. He had this hat that belonged to the actual man who these dog tags belong to.
Okay.
His name is William Hopkins, and those are his dog tags and hat.
Okay. Very good.
And the next picture, so I told you to take note of the gaiters that Walter was wearing.
Yep.
So early war, all the troops would have been issued with those gaiters. They were crap. Everybody hated them. They threw them away, got rid of them. And the guys started using these. And these are wool. And they just kind of wrapped them around their ankles up to close to their knee. And that's what they wore as kind of makeshift gaiters. But they stuck. Everybody used them. Everybody had some. And these are original. And the cool thing is these ones actually belong to my wife's great-grandfather, who also served during World War I. So this is a family heirloom.
Okay.
That we possess. And his name was DeForest Lang. And these are his. And the next picture, I believe, has another object of his. Yeah, right there, written on there, DeForest Lang. This is his gas mask.
Oh, wow.
So troops would have been issued a gas mask. I have this in the other room over there, but I hesitate to get it out. It's a little fragile.
Right.
Kind of an interesting thing about this is inside there is a card that you're supposed to fill out every time you use it. So the troops, every time they would use their gas mask, would fill out when they used it. And once it got filled up, they'd have to get their canister in there replaced. So this is DeForest's. And then the next picture also belongs to DeForest. That's his helmet.
Wow.
So these three items are all original. They belong to my wife's great-grandfather who served during World War I. So they're pretty, special to her. They're special to me, and hopefully someday that I can pass these on to kids that we would have.
Yeah. Wow. That's some really interesting stuff. Go ahead. All right. And so,
Oh yeah. So I
sidearm.
also I collect guns too from World War I. This is a 1911 Colt 45. This was actually made in 1918 in late war, but really great shape. It's an excellent piece. As it's called a 1911 because it was actually invented in 1911, and it was such a great pistol that the Army used it all the way into the 1980s.
Wow, that's a great shape.
It's in great shape. Yeah, I really like it.
How long have you had that?
I've had this for probably 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And this one is also a rifle that I own. This is a model 1917 30-06. So this would have been a typical rifle that a soldier would have carried in the trenches during World War I if they were in the REF, American Expeditionary Force. So this is strictly a U.S. rifle. However, it was actually designed in England. But they couldn't produce this quick enough when the war started, so they scrapped the whole design of this and sold it to us. And because they got a jump start on the First World War before we did, so we were able to reproduce this for our troops before we went over there.
Wow, amazing! And I take it that was the same hat.
That was the same hat, yeah, campaign hat.
The campaign hat, right? Absolutely. Yeah. Wow.
I have other World War I pieces, but maybe we can save those for another show at another point. But yeah, those are all very important to me. They're cool artifacts. They're in good shape, and I'm glad I have them so that I can preserve them and carry on these men's legacy and honor them by taking care of it for them.
Absolutely. Well preserved and well done.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I took a look at, because I was pretty sure I knew the difference between an armistice and a peace treaty.
Okay.
I went and looked it up, but I wanted to verify. So an armistice is a cease to fighting. It is derived from the Latin arma, meaning arms as in weapons, and stitum, meaning a stopping. So stopping of hostilities. It doesn't necessarily mean the end of the war. It basically means we're going to stop fighting while we nail down the peace treaty. So armistices still happen, but it's not there. It is the thing that would happen prior to a peace treaty.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Hey, way to go, Bob. We need a bell for you.
Great, Bob. Absolutely.
Way to go, Bob.
Yeah.
Always draining threes over there. He is. There we go. Yes, excellent.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Way to go, Bob.
So I do have those.
Well, very good. Jarrod, great job. Start working on next week's presentation in history.
Sounds good.
That was really good. I enjoyed that quite a bit. And again, thank you all veterans.
Yes,
thank you for all your service. Enjoy your day tomorrow.
I'm going to have, since I don't want my grandparents going into Bob Evans, this Veterans Day, which is typically our Veterans Day hangout, and we get ourselves some roasted chicken. I think what we'll do is we'll just pick that up curbside and deliver it to my grandparents and give my grandpa some Bob Evans for and I have to be the good grandson. I got to get over there and record his story for the Veterans History Project. It's something that's really important to me. I want to make sure that we get done.
Yeah,
it's really fascinating. Anybody that it's really for I encourage anybody that fancies themselves as an American, one way or the other. It's really worth it to go there, and it's all the way from World War I, World War II vets, all the way through both Iraq conflicts, Afghanistan. It's all there, and it's really awesome.
Yeah,
and horrible at the same time.
Yeah, I've always encouraged people, while you're young, talk to your relatives that have lived before you and get their information and stories down, because one day they'll be gone and that information will be gone. And you have lost your chance, and it will forever be a mystery to you. So if you have the opportunity of older relatives, especially ones that have lived through something very important, get their perspective, get their story, learn from them, and record it.
Yep. Excellent.
And especially in the times that we live in today, with the media and social media as pervasive as it is in all of society, if you do not know your history, you are doomed to repeat it. And it is worthwhile to go learn some history for today.
Well, in closing for tonight, Bob, I thought I'd give you some history.
Awesome. I didn't know that.
Okay. On this day in 1871, explorer Henry Stanley greeted a fellow explorer in search of the source of the Nile River with the famous words, "Dr. Livingston, I presume."
That's awesome.
And a very famous song.
Was that Paul Stanley's dad? Grandfather?
That was Paul Stanley.
Great.
Unfortunately, Paul Stanley's original name was Stanley Eisen.
Eisen, right? Yes.
Yes, but that's very, very well done, Bob. Also, a very famous song from the 1970s was written about something that happened on this day. American freighter the Edmund Fitzgerald sank during a storm on Lake Superior.
Mm-hmm.
And Gordon Lightfoot had written his song about that.
Hang on. Give me a second. I can make this happen. Hang on. You keep talking, because that's...
Yeah, okay. And also, I don't have the year, but on this day, many years ago, probably Bob's favorite TV show kicked off, and that was Sesame Street.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So there are a couple of November 10th things that have happened. Oh, and Bob is going to get his guitar out. And, Jarrod, the way it always works with Bob, we always go back to how we start.
What's that? Oh, here.
Exactly. And this is exactly, everybody, this is how the pre-show goes. I try to talk to Bob. He zones out and just drums away on his guitar.
Legend lives on from the Chippewa down to the big lake they call Gitchagoo. The liquid said never gives up her dead when the skies of November turn gloomy.
Chuck Burris is never around when you need him.
That's right. I would have gonged myself, but hey,
no, that was actually very good, Bob.
Who knew that when this show started that it would end with a live rendition of the Edmund Fitzgerald?
And a phenomenal job done by you, Bob, as always. So, well, thank you, everybody, for your participation in the show. Jarrod Tudor, again, top shelf reporting on the election. Jared Gray, excellent job on the Armistice. Oh, there's Dr. Tudor. Mm-hmm. And Karaoke Bob, as always, it's a pleasure to work alongside you on this. And you always put together a nice episode every time. And there
are very few other places I'd rather be tonight.
And like all our conversations, Bob, you get the first word, the last word, and most of the middle ones. So, Bob, why don't you take us out of here?
I will. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us for another edition of I Didn't Know That. That seems awfully loud. Thank you for joining us for another edition of I Didn't Know That. It happens here on Facebook every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. with me and Mike Stoffer, and now Jared Gray, who usually gives us some wine, but tonight, with Veterans Day coming up, it was apropos that we remember that, and why we are all Americans and the power that we have with each and every election. For all of you who voted, thank you for doing your duty. Jarrod Tudor, thank you. Jared Gray, thank you. Mike Stoffer, thank you for having me part of it. And we'll see you back here next Tuesday night for another edition of I Didn't Know That, presented by Stoffer Mortgage. Have a good night, everybody.